Okay, this is the question time section of the morning. I'm Mike Ramsay and I'm on the editorial board of Mental Health Nursing Journal. So I'm convening this, not from the middle like David done, but from the side. I'm going to pass the mic and allow each of the panel to introduce themselves.
I think I've got a mic on. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm Dianna Manson. I'm the patient representative here, and I come along with CAPS Advocacy, who provide advocacy services in Midlothian and East Lothian, and we're doing several projects in mental health within CAPS Advocacy, one of which is the one that I'm involved in, which is experience of psychosis. And we're planning on initiating not only our peers into how they might feel represented and to represent also the condition, but to show to the public and to health workers what it is we deal with, so that you get it from the patient perspective straight away. So our ongoing survey at the moment is experiences of psychosis. We have another survey which is going on from CAPS, which is about the borderline personality disorder, and the survey is going on there. So if any of you are interested in these surveys, and also eating disorders, so there's a survey going on. So Fingal Dawkins, who is our facilitator here, will be out at the front with all sorts of information if you wish to see it afterwards. And as I say, I represent other organisations as well, because we have MAP in West Lothian for advocacy, and I chair Advocard in Edinburgh, which is for adults with mental health conditions wanting advocacy in Edinburgh. So we cover all the Lothians in advocacy, and with Fingal we do collective advocacy in this project. So collective advocacy is when we work together as a group to unite and therefore to have a louder voice.
My name is Stuart Martin. I'm a CPN working in West Lothian in a continuing care team, fairly recently qualified, just since February last year, and work in a team that combines social work colleagues and nursing colleagues.
Hello, my name is Freya Sewell. I'm just literally recently qualified, so I'll be graduating on Thursday. I've just taken up my thank you. I've just taken up my first post with NHS Shetland, where I'm a CPN working in the Substance Misuse Recovery Service. So that's a kind of mixed team between adult nurses, mental health nurses, and recovery workers.
Hi, my name is Karen Ozden. I think I'm here as the Methuselah mental health nursing. I've been around for a while. At the moment I work as Chief Nursing General Manager at the Royal Edinburgh Hospital, but I've worked across several other boards, and I'm currently the chair of the Mental Health Nurse Leads in Scotland, so I'll wear two hats today in terms of the questions.
Okay, so the first question comes from it's from Mark Doris, which is a question about mental health nurses and prescribing.
So I was just going to ask, it appears that there's a very low number of mental health nurses gaining the non-medical prescribing course that I see that's quite popular amongst the general nurses, and I just wondered if the panel could maybe answer why that might be. Those who have it, it's been proven that it encourages a person-centred approach, and it's a more effective medication management, but it's not that common within mental health nurses, and I'm wondering why that is. That's all. Thanks.
I thought I'd give this to Karen first.
Thanks. I think you're right. I think there's, over the years, I think there's probably been two schools of thought around
Well, also I happen to work on the psychosocial intervention courses that NES are doing with CPNs and OTs, and we work along with the teams from Edinburgh, particularly because we're our Lothian group. We worked originally in Glasgow with Professor Gumley, and it was discovered that the nurses had a difficulty in assimilating some sort of a program of treatment, because they were very much aware of the evidence base of medicine. And the therapies that come, psychological therapies, are difficult to evaluate, and to actually have evidence base But nurses are very interested now in the approach to the psychological therapies, and it's of interest to us because I've had 50 years of medication, and this is what it's done to me, I reckon. It's hit my neurological system, something terrible, and a lot of my peers have not survived. I've survived to tell the tale. So I feel I should be telling a story of how we can progress. And I think we can progress by having both types of medical prescribing and also psychological prescribing. It's important.
Thank you. Can I ask the question, or is your question answered?
Yes, very much.
Does anybody want to come back on any of the points that have been raised by the panel before we move on? Okay. The second question leads on from this, I think, quite nicely, and it's from our own Kenny Matthew.
Okay. Hiya, panel.
Hi, pardon. Yeah, you're right, Mike. I don't know if this question is actually now a wee bit redundant, because I was going to ask, is the advanced nurse practitioner role a positive development for mental health nursing? And I guess the kind of reasons I had for asking that were, where is this role going? Because traditionally whenever nurses took on extended roles, a lot of that was things that the medical profession might not have wanted to do anymore. And as well as the kind of professional aspect, I was thinking about the industrial aspect of the role. When I see advanced nurse practitioner roles now being advertised in the real world, they tend to be grade 7 roles. But when I look at the job specification for these colleagues, there seems to be a lot required in terms of education, in terms of experience, in terms of skills, in terms of autonomy, and in terms of the responsibility. And I'm just wondering if that's where this role should be pitched at as well. So just wonder what the panel think of that.
Let me start with Dianna this time. You've already talked about developing the role of nurses in terms of psychological therapy. So do you think advancing...
Switch over to the medical model, yes. I think it's important that we have nurses who are prescribers, because so often I've seen peers who have come from the community seeking help, and the only people there are the CPNs who provide that help, or the social worker on the team, or others on the team. There's no doctor there, and there's nobody to prescribe yet. The prescribing of some pretty major tranquilizer or some antipsychotic might well help. Now, I think it's the necessity when the person is obviously non-capacitated, the person is really so unwell that there is a need for a quick bit of help before things start sort of spiral. And I think it's a good way to de-escalate quickly by just providing a major tranquilizer rather than a major antipsychotic. I think it's a good way to calm things down at source, if there's a prescriber there.
Okay, I'll pass on to...
Okay, I'm not sure what I'd add to it really. Just to say that there does seem to be probably a general downgrading of nursing posts. So increasingly junior nurses are being expected to practice at quite an advanced level. So how we fit in AMP roles into that, I don't know. It will need a lot of work. A lot of the stuff, the documents I've seen coming out have been quite generic. So there needs to be a lot of work done on refining that for the fields of practice to see how they would define it. So I think I'd really need to see a more definite description in terms of mental health practice. The idea that I wouldn't necessarily want to look at simply psychological therapies. I mean, however important they are, I think then we're moving from working under a medical model to perhaps working under a psychological model. And what about nursing models? Where are the nursing models in the place of that? So that'd be my thought on it.
Kenny, your question was, are they positive? I do think they're positive. I think they're still in their infancy in terms of the potential. Lanarkshire and Ayrshire have developed a certain model of advanced nurse practitioners for mental health nursing, very much based on a junior doctor type model. So the advanced nurse practitioners in Lanarkshire and in Ayrshire work on the junior doctor rota as such. Part of that is that they have to be able to be very skilled in physical health assessment. I actually think advanced mental health nursing practice can go much further. The first cohort in Lothian is going to be started in February, and certainly what we're keen to develop is that it's more than just physical health assessment that's part of that, and colleagues have alluded to that it's actually about what are the advanced nursing interventions. So things like mental state examination to a very advanced level, but actually what is the impact of that on someone's level of functioning? What is the impact of that on somebody's quality of life? So the whole nursing bit, I think, hasn't been fully explored in terms of mental health nursing advanced practice. I think the education level is right in terms of master's education level, really because of the higher level critical thinking that's needed and the higher level decision making that's needed as well. And you know, I would hope we'd be sitting here in 5 years' time embracing advanced nurse practitioners. At the moment, the main route for senior nurses to go through to achieve, you mentioned band 7 or higher, is to go through a management route, through a senior charge nurse route. But we have to look at other opportunities for how we can retain very, very experienced mental health nurses at very senior grades without them feeling that they have to either full-time go into university jobs, for example. So how do we keep people in clinical practice that allows them to work in a very, very skilled and experienced way? So I would hope in 5 years' time we're in a better position with advanced nurse practice.
Okay, Monica mentioned Scotland's pernicious affinity with alcohol, and I've been in this church twice on a Monday morning, and the pub next door empties it seems, from the weekend's excesses about this time every Monday. The next question is from Gavin Cullen, and it's about identity, I believe.
Not my identity. The panel, I think, has begun to touch on what my question alludes to. It's almost as if these questions are linked in some way. But anyway, so my question is, do you think mental health nursing has a strong or distinct enough professional identity? And if you want a part two, my part two would be, if you do think that, if it currently has a strong, distinct professional identity, what is it?
Let me start with Freya this time.
I'm not sure. I find that quite a hard question to answer. I think there probably is an identity, but I'm not sure how I would define it. I suppose it made me think about, recently I was putting in a referral to social work for somebody, and part of that was that I needed to organise a deep clean for somebody's house. And the lady on the end of the phone said, well, yeah, don't you do that? And I suddenly thought, oh, maybe I do that. Maybe mental health nurses do deep cleans. I'm not sure. Like, it could be. And I sort of had to pause, and because I think there's so many different facets to what you do. I suppose something that I'm kind of reflecting upon starting work is that maybe a lot of how it's defined at the moment is through generations past. It's quite difficult sometimes to reconcile what you learn in university to then going out into practice, because there's quite specific ways that people work. There's quite institutionalized ways of working in some ways, which both have positives and negatives. So I suppose as an emerging mental health nurse, it's difficult sometimes to know what your identity is, or to hold on to your idea of what your identity should be, I would say.
Yeah, I don't think we have a strong disciplinary identity. I think that nurse training is informed by lots of different sources, by training on ethics, on the law, on as well as to some degree psychiatric models. So it's a mixed identity from the start. I think we were probably trained by some of the people who trained us had a more defined identity. Maybe there was an element of anti-psychiatry in that identity, but I think that's to some extent changing. I think what strikes me is in practice when I work with speech and language therapists or physiotherapists, I see health professionals who work with specific tools and processes and in specific ways. It doesn't mean they can't be person-centered, but they have particular background of knowledge and methodologies and stuff that they're drawing on. I think that's less clear-cut in nursing, but I mean, classically one of our strengths would be our relationship with the service users that we support. And I think a lot of our ability to influence things in an MDT, well, superficially MDT culture, is from the basis of that relationship. So if I was going to tag it to anything, I would tag it to that. Our amount of contact time and our relationship with service users is a strength.
I think it probably depends on what arena you ask. So I think within the mental health nursing community, we do have a strong identity, but I'm not sure that other families in nursing fully understand mental health nursing, and possibly other professions as well. I think it varies, to be honest. I think in the last I'm going back to 2006 when we had the Mental Health Nursing Review in Scotland, and that was the first review in 40 odd years of mental health nursing actually being a profession, and I think that did an awful lot for mental health nursing at that time. But how do we maintain that, how do we sustain that, and how do we develop it further I think is a question I would put back to the room really, because I think we've done a lot in the last 15 years or so, but we need to do more.
So Dianna is a collaborator with mental health nurses and a patient's representative. Do mental health nurses have an identity?
Well, I'd like to say that 50 years ago, when I was a medical student, the medics regarded the psychiatrists as those doctors who were frightened of blood, and the nurses in the profession 50 years ago were the second-class citizens to nursing, in general nursing. They have certainly increased in their identity, but I think it's important that we integrate and that we don't have a differentiation, and that in the future, when nursing is to be in the community, that we know far more about the skilling of each other, and that we are able to then have our specialist skills as mental. I'm talking we, because I identify within the group of nurses who treat me as being the specialist in my case, but as you talked about MDTs, I think it's important that we have specialists, but I think we should be far more interactive and integrated. I think it's important to cut down this barrier, because when we have psychiatry and we have acute and general medicine or mental health nursing and general nurses, there is a division, and then you have the barriers that lead to the stigmas that lead to differentiation. And it's a huge, vast thing to learn, is the whole of nursing. I understand that too, but in the communities we need to be able to recognise the different things that relate, because they all dovetail. It's a holistic world out there. Sorry to smash that one, but I do believe you have certainly gone up in your identity than I started 50 years ago in service.
Okay, I'm going to open that one out to the audience. Maybe Gavin wants to come back first, or maybe wants anybody got a burning desire to come back on that regarding MHN identity.
If you think about all the variety of the work that mental health nurses do, I don't think we actually recognise it ourselves. So I don't think other people recognise it. It's myself, we've got people who are working specialists in CAMS, we've got people who work specialists in psychological therapy, people have chosen inpatients, people have chosen all different strands of mental health nursing, but it's still mental health nursing. If you did that in adult, you'd be a district nurse, you'd be a health visitor, you'd be a child nurse. So, I think we cover so many different roles as a mental health practitioner that we don't get the recognition.
Thank you. Anybody got any other points or questions for the panel?
Thanks. And I think the thing about the divide between maybe general nurses and mental health nurses is really interesting. And even today on Twitter, there was a debate in Australia where they have very generalised, comprehensive training, which they moved to 30 years ago, but unfortunately hasn't actually resulted in improved physical health for patients with serious mental illness, and actually probably has resulted in poor mental health outcomes as well too, because they've really struggled to attract staff who have really the appropriate value base to work in these settings. So I think that says something about why people choose to work in mental health, maybe perhaps in the first place.
Thank you very much. Grant King, University of Dundee. Two quick thoughts, if that's okay, Mike. One is, I wonder how many other professions spend the amount of time, both within nursing as a whole and mental health nursing, reflecting on our identity. That's one question to think about. And the other thing, I think my answer to that question is, I am who I need to be at the time that person needs me to be there, whatever they need. And I think it's the flexibility across the biopsychosocial paradigms that nurses possess that defines us in that all-purpose advocate. An expert in all things, and holism would be where my position would be. So my identity is whatever you need it to be at that time, whether it is a deep clean, whether it is psychological intervention, whether it's prescribing. I have an option to be all of those things, and almost no other profession can offer that.
I'd just like to say, as a social worker, if you really don't know where your identity is, try being one of them. So on a positive note, I mean, I've spent a lot of time working with mental health nurses, and I do think they have a very strong identity from my personal experience. I think they could always really tell me what they could do above what I could do, you know, in terms of differences in role. And I think that was important, because I think we do need to have those distinctions. But I think community psychiatric nurses, for me, are always the ones that are very, very clear about their identity. And as I say, I think a professional where we are a bit more all over the place and a bit loose is social work. So don't do yourselves down, I would say.
Okay, any other points? Okay, we'll move on. All these questions, they all have a kind of cultural and socio-political kind of angle to them, and the last question is no different, but it does move us slightly away from where we've been. Steve Jones.
I've got another observation as well. I just spoke to the health minister from Malawi about 2 weeks ago, and she was a nurse who was a health visitor in Malawi. And she says, we're really worried our country has no psychiatrists at all. We've just appointed our first 2 psychiatrists in Malawi in 2017. And I said, well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the country was run in relation to its mental health care by mental health nurses. So I think for me that was fascinating as a British mental health nurse to see a country that relies heavily on nurses for its workforce. And India has 600 mental health nurses trained every year. So I think if you look overseas, you start to see how services can develop. But my question comes to 10% of the nursing workforce is male, mental health nursing workforce. And I'm now at that end where I'm starting to think about my golden years in my 50s and exiting the mental health nursing workforce and losing 30 odd years of experience. But should we be encouraging should we be expanding and encouraging the mental health nursing workforce, and especially looking at the focus on males within that nursing workforce? And that's a lot trickier question than it sounds, I think.
Okay, maybe ask Dianna to kick us off with that.
Okay. I think I revert back to the nurse who said, I am who I am. I think it's how you relate to your patient rather than who or what you are, whether you're straight, LBGT, coloured, ethnic, white, whatever you are a nurse. And although some people prefer to deal with male nurses are, because of physiology, stronger, but that could be debated nowadays. I think really it's to encourage a decent standard of living from what you do, and to allow people to feel that they're valued for what they do, and that they get a good quality of pay for what they do. And if male nurses perhaps think that they can't have the amount of money that they require to have their lifestyle that they want, and female nurses have always cowed down to just being the deferrer, I think it's equal. I think it's absolutely equal, and I think it's who you are rather than what you are.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that completely, and I think I've seen some focus on social media about men in nursing. It's quite prominent at the moment, obviously, and I'm not honestly sure how I feel about that. I suppose maybe I need to be a bit more reflexive and think about my gender in the workplace and stuff, but I think the focus should really be on the nursing profession as a whole in terms of attracting people into it. I mean, we're probably short in numbers across all areas and regions, so I think the focus should be really on building nursing as a very rich career path, important career path, and building the status of nursing rather than perhaps focusing on gender. I don't know. I'd like to,
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think I'm quite interested that there could be a role for more acceptance of people with lived experience who are going into nursing. I think we still sort of shy away from talking about our own personal experiences, or I'm always surprised that there aren't more peer workers within services, because they have such fantastic hope to offer people. I'm not sure why it is that we're sort of afraid of that, because I think that we are a little bit. But I think it would be great to encourage more people to recognise their own kind of recovery, their own story, and say that they actually have something to offer to the profession, whether they're male or female.
I guess just to build on what everybody else has said, for me it's about people with the right values in terms of mental health nursing, and it doesn't matter what gender background or whatever or ethnic background they have, but actually being in the job for the right reasons is the most important thing.
Yeah, a couple of points.
Just really to express a slightly different view, to say that in my opinion I think it's important that we do have diversity in the workforce. For example, if you're a white woman, you're not a black woman, so you only understand a perspective from a white woman. So I think in terms of things like white privilege, it's important that we have diversity and we have different views. I work part of my time in the prison, and I see that in particular with women of BME groups who feel discriminated against, but often people don't see it because they're looking at it from a white woman's perspective. So I think for me as well, it's about sort of a more intersectional approach, so not just looking at black and white and male and female, but looking at the kind of combination of factors. So for example, poverty and ethnicity, poverty, gender and ethnicity, and so on. So I agree that it's about values, and that, but at the same time, I do think it's important that we have diversity in the profession to represent all the people we're working with and make sure that everyone has sort of an equal service.
One of the points I wanted to make was something that we've done at MHNA was recognise the kind of worry around mental health nurses having an identity, but also the kind of concern around wanting to have pride in the profession and sharing that. So that's why hopefully people have seen the mental health nursing future memes at the back of the room, and you may recognise some of the people in those memes around the room who've already contributed them. What I would say is, if anyone is proud of their profession, then contribute a meme to us, and we will use them as a way of encouraging people. I think the bit about encouraging men specifically always fascinates me, because I am a health visitor, and as a male health visitor I'm very much in the minority. And actually that kind of bit about, we should think about how we can encourage as many people as possible into nursing, whoever they are. And if we look at the groups that are least likely to be in it and encourage them to do it, then surely that's a really amazing first step. And I think, like Vanessa says, in terms of men in nursing, even though slightly less, they're not a hugely marginalised group, but when we look at other people in nursing, they are. And certainly if we look at how they progress through their professional lives, they're even more less represented. So I kind of think, as a white man, I can't complain about being in a kind of a poor situation, because I know that there are so many more in much more worse situation than me.
Any other thoughts?
No. There's two things. One, I think, when we talk about gender specifically, then as a corollary to the idea that there's no good reason why a majority of doctors should be men, because this is changing over time, the post-patriarchal sort of social agenda. Well, there's no necessarily good reason why a majority of nurses should be women, because the history of the cultural assumptions around the genders maybe lended itself to that, where medicine was considered a problem-solving profession and nursing a person-centered profession, and therefore one attracted men and one attracted women. If we're trying to invert one, then we should obviously try and invert the other, because there's a lot of person-centeredness that goes on in medicine, and there's a lot of problem-solving that goes on in nursing, so there's no reason why those binaries need to continue. However, what I would say is any sort of campaigning around targeting men specifically to get into nursing, I think would ultimately end up undermining itself, because analogously to sort of affirmative action drives in America, what it ends up doing is actually essentializing the differences. So rather than actually break the differences down, they just become concretized. And so you start actually emphasizing why men aren't in there already, rather than talking about all the positives that there are if they join, or all the the things that anyone of any gender can do. So those are just 2 points I would have.
Any other points?
I don't think it would hurt necessarily. There's a lot of drives to get more females into STEM and things like that. There's a lot of drives to get more females into many sectors, so I don't know why there's such a pushback against getting men in nursing. And lastly, there was Royal College of Nursing motion that was rejected, that wanted to have a strategy to get men in nursing, and I just found that a bit hypocritical, considering the drives that women get to get into other fields. That's all.
Okay. So pass the microphone. There's a couple of people around behind you, and Stephen.
So my name's Don Slater. I'm a nurse consultant. I also have lived experience of psychosis, and I'm also a man. I found the panel's response, particularly to the comments about experts by experience, a really interesting one and slightly contradictory in regard to the comments about men. I noticed that you all nodded encouragingly in regard to the expert by experiences being more involved, peer workers being more involved. But I would argue that I also have expertise as a man coming into that, and I don't see that there's a difference between the two. It almost seems contradictory to encourage one and not the other.
I think there's another comment down your waist. Jonathan. Any more? Okay, that was it. Austin.
Just about the peer stuff, I was also interested in that. So, thank you. I guess to add to that, I was also interested in the comment about why don't we use peers more often? So that was my question. Why don't we do that? Because we don't. We keep them very separate, don't we?
Does anybody want to field that?
I think it's the difficulty again of the equal, diverse and general way that peers are accepted within the workforce, and also peer supporters, workers, do very well in the third sector because they're so accepted. But in the nursing sector, I don't know if that happens so well. I think I don't often hear of the nurses who nurse me saying, well, actually, I had psychosis, or I was someone who has been in the service for a while, or has suffered severe depression, because nurses don't like to admit to that. Yet, if the peers are there, they don't get the pay levels, they're not recognised as such, they don't go forward, they don't go upward, and it's reckoned, yes, they'd like to be able to try to enable them to increase their ability to go back into the workforce, but it doesn't always happen that way. They're used to it as cheap labour. I'm very sorry to say that, but that's what happens with our groups. But there's groups within, I can say within CAPS, there are people with lived experience who do extremely well and lead a lot of very important projects, or people within Africa who do the same with lived experience. But generally within this big profession of nursing, I don't know if that happens.
Somebody else want to?
I think Diana's right. I think unless there's almost like a career framework in place to support peers and how they progress within the profession, then it is undermining the value of what they do. But that aside, I don't think we should ignore the fact that many mental health nurses have also had mental health difficulties themselves, and they bring an awful lot to the profession through their own lived experience. They might not wear a badge on their sleeve that says that, but I think personally, in terms of the value that people with lived experience add, I think is huge. So we shouldn't think that there aren't already peers within the workforce, because there are.
I'll just add that, and I think there are some mixed messages in training as well when in the formation of nurses, when they talk about what is an appropriate disclosure, what's not an appropriate disclosure, and I think that it's in this respect it's translating in terms of the enduring stigma, and that there's a lot of talk of resilience, and we any sort of admission in terms of our own health issues is a sense of failure or a problem waiting to happen. So yeah.
Okay, just to conclude this session, thanks very much for your participation. One of the things that a session like this for MHNA is useful for is to find out what you, people who are a consumer of this conference for today, perhaps a member, perhaps a potential future member, how would you like to see something like the MHNA champion some of these kind of causes? We've kind of come to run out of time, but you've all got probably free post-it notes. So if anybody wants to stick post-it notes...
We've got 30 more minutes, Mike.
30 more minutes?
Yeah.
You said an hour.
Finish at 12:30.
I don't.
We're all right.
Who can sing? We've no more questions. So are there any issues about how MHNA as an organisation can represent some of these cultural, socio-political, even educational themes for mental health nursing? Gavin?
Well, I've got a question. I don't want to take away your there.
I've got a question. I'm Gavin Fergie, one of the lead professional officers for Scotland. The safe staffing legislation is working its way through Parliament. So will that be an opportunity? Well, I suppose we can't, it's not an opportunity because we're going to have to do it. But what are the challenges for mental health nursing to make sure that we have the right people there at the right time doing the right job?
Okay. He's asking, safe staffing. Yeah. Staffing, sorry.
Safe staffing.
Yeah. But it the question is really around how do we ensure we've got the right people at the right time? Or maybe to paraphrase Grant, how do we have the right people to be whoever they need to be at that time? Anybody want a thought?
I think that's a very good point. I think it's worth highlighting it's safe and effective legislation, and I think quite often the effective bit gets affected by us trying to keep services safe. So we'll often move staff from one area to another area because it's unsafe, but actually what that does is impact on the effectiveness of that area that loses a staff member to that ward or other team. I think we have to look at the realities that there aren't enough people to do the job that is demanded, and so we have to look to others really and look at other roles and how they can supplement what mental health nurses do, because we could throw as much money at it as was available, but actually we still might not recruit the numbers of staff that would be needed. So I know in Scotland that the associate practitioner role isn't something that's been supported. I think further down the line we might need to look at that again, and I know there are some roles that aren't called associate practitioners but work very much in that type of way of working. So I think there's things that we can learn from the third sector, for example, and we need to be careful that we're not, I suppose what I'm not saying is dumbing down the profession, but what I'm saying is there's aspects of practice that could be delivered by other people that aren't necessarily registered nurses, because the reality might be we don't have enough of the registered nurses to do the job that's required. So it's something about balancing pragmatism with reality and aspiration, I guess.
Just to only add a thought that it strikes me when I work in a community team and we are understaffed and overstretched, but even when I've done bank shifts in the ward, it strikes me there's a differentiation between a ward that is considered to be fully staffed and on what is safe staffing level. I think there's quite a significant difference between the two.
Yes?
I'd just like to say, I live now in a long-term hospital, a continuing care hospital within the community, and it's Glen. And we're difficult staffing levels like the rest of it, have everything to do with the NHS. But our backbone are the care assistants who, am I not, you can't hear me. I've changed the microphone around the other way, I think. I can't see properly. I'll speak on that one. Sorry, what I'm just wanting to say is our care assistants do a marvellous job of interacting with the trains. It's off. Is it not? I think it's gone off again. Is it? It's gone off. It's off.
Still working, I think.
I'm holding it the wrong way. Is that right?
No. Yeah.
Okay. Just to say that I think that the interaction of the care assistants with the trained nurses is wonderful, and well-trained care assistants are a pretty good backbone when there's a dealer shortage of trained nurse staff. You know, it's good to get good care assistants on the wards, and I have to say that.
So I don't know if that answered your question, Gavin, about how we get those people. We do get some of those people though because they've been damn good care assistants and we've progressed them on to registration, but I don't think we've entirely answered your question. Anybody got any other thoughts on safe staffing?
Mike. I think one of the worries that I would have around the argument of having safe staffing might kind of have a problem because we haven't got enough mental health nurses, and then kind of the defeatist approach of, well, we can't get more mental health nurses. We have to put in things in place at an early stage so we do get enough mental health nurses, that we have enough training, we have the incentives and benefits that bring people into the profession. And I think one of my worries is that sometimes the argument can be given that by promoting a professional role, we're somehow speaking down the role that supports that. So by promoting the role of mental health nurses, we're criticising the role of assistant practitioners or nursing associates, etc. And actually it's not about that, it's about knowing that to have people that are properly trained doing the job is paramount to having good outcomes and being most cost effective. And to do that, we have to put in the effort at the right points to get that coming out the other end. And for those countries that do have safer staffing legislation, it does appear to have a link to the increased numbers in the professions that have that legislation around it.
Any other views? Do we have any other questions then, or any other points?
So 2020 will bring a very significant change to the experience of nurse education in Scotland, across of course the whole of the UK under the National Midwifery Council standards for education. One of the things that we see, particularly in Scotland, where we're trying to have a fairly unified approach, the fields of nursing practice have been retained before individual nursing fields, but in reality, when you read the standards, we will study the same competencies, and the differentiation will be around the depths to which we do that. So we will have a more generically educated workforce. I'm just wondering what the panel's views on that will be, that by 2023 we will start to have in the workforce individuals who have a much broader experience across adult, child, mental health and learning disability nursing.
I think I'm on overtime. Well, I am one of those nurses. I trained during the modular scheme. There'll be some people in the room that remember the modular scheme, not many left, and actually it was a good training, and I welcome the change. I think for certainly the last 15 years or so, mental health nurse training has developed considerably in certain aspects, but the elements it's lost has been largely around physical healthcare, to be honest. So for people who weren't aware of the modular training, during the first 18 months it was a generic training where you spent time, 13 weeks actually, in medical wards and surgical wards and accident emergency with district nurses and theatre and maternity care, and then you split off and you spent your last 18 months specialising in your field of practice, so within mental health nursing. And I think that gave us a very rounded experience. It let us see people who had mental health difficulties out with mental health services. So it let us see when somebody has a mental illness who lands in a medical ward, who lands in a surgical ward, what the impact of that is, how adjustment might need to be made to support that person in those environments. And I think we've lost that, to be honest, over the last number of years. We do have times when our adult colleagues find it very, very difficult to work with people experiencing mental illness within a surgical ward, medical ward, people with dementia, for example. So I actually think it's a very positive move, and I think it's very positive that we've had, that the NMC have decided to retain the fields whilst doing that as well. So.
Having just finished and had solely mental health nursing training, I don't think I would change that. Personally, I found it to be, I needed those 3 years. I needed to work in lots of different settings, to experience lots of different people, lots of different ways of working that would all then be relevant. And I think there could be more focus on physical health skills. I mean, I worked as a learning disability support worker, so I suppose I had that as well on the side that I pursued because I think that's important. And but I tend to think that the thing that I gained from the degree was mostly around critical thinking, just challenging things, thinking in a kind of different way. And I don't know if that happens so much in adult nursing. Maybe it does. I've no idea because I didn't do it. But I suppose my kind of thought around mental health nursing is that you see the way that things are done and you should always be thinking, is that right? How could this be different? Is this up to task? And I suppose that's what I feel that I gained from the training, and I'm not sure. I think for me that's the most that I can do for people, is to look at what we're doing and always say, is this the best that I can be doing with this person? Does this fit their needs? And I'm not sure that training in a kind of general medical setting would give me that experience. I don't think it would, from my personal experience of being in general medical settings.
Yeah, I think I would agree with a lot of that. I also wonder if a generic, given that the time available in a pre-reg program is really very brief, I do wonder if generic training actually provides you, for example, in the context of mental health care, with the right knowledge base and skills in relation to delivering physical care within your role as a nurse. I think there's certainly room for nursing programs to be, mental health nursing programs to include specific physical health related issues that are going to be faced when you, for example, have to move in to a community post as a nurse in a continuing care team. You're giving people powerful medications. I think we have an ethical responsibility to be aware of all of these medications, the impact on people physiologically, and I think we could do a lot more tailored training input, so I'm not sure how more generic programs would address that, if it would be useful. I also think we should be looking at post-registration training and education as well. I don't think we should be necessarily trying to cram everything into one very brief three-year program. We need to be thinking further ahead, and that should also be part of making nursing an attractive profession as well.
Dianna?
I just wanted to say, I don't think you ever stop learning. And one of the things that nowadays you have the benefit of having is those of us with lived experience who come in to tell you during your modules how we are, how we feel, how we react, what that does to us, how we react to a specific medication, what it does to us physically, because sometimes the medications are pretty hard-hitting. And when you hear it from the mouth of those who have been through it and are willing to talk about it so that they can progress and learn, that's the best way in a positive environment to do it. And certainly in the general hospitals, the nurses get quite a bit of practice dealing with patients who have particular conditions. But in mental health, we're out here saying, well, here we are. You know, if you can't get us on the wards because your placements are not long enough or you don't see enough of us, here we are. We're in the third sector waiting to be heard. Where all these resources that we're providing within, like CAPS, Avocado, and the different third sectors environment, we have a lot to give for you to hear straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, and I don't relate to myself as a horse. I'm probably too old for that. I'm an old nag, I think, perhaps. I apologise.
I had an unrelated question, but I'll also just put in my 2 cents about that. As someone that's coming to the end of their mental health nursing training, I definitely don't feel adequately prepared to deal with physical health issues that might come my way, and yet I'm very aware of the fact that it's my responsibility to look after the health and well-being of the whole person, including their physical health. So I think that does need to be improved in the training, so I welcome changes. My question was kind of mainly aimed at Freya and Stuart, but I absolutely welcome the responses of the other panellists. There's quite a lot of final year mental health nursing students in the room. I guess my question was, what are the main challenges you found since qualifying and becoming professionals? And do you have any advice for us when we're coming to that sort of transition period very soon?
Okay. I think that the biggest challenges were, for me, going straight into a community post, which I would encourage people to do certainly. I've only been in it a year and a half. I would say it's trying to define the scope of your work It's also trying to work with the expectations that people place on you, to avoid becoming perhaps overburdened and overstressed, and to create a healthy work-life balance. It's really important for you. If you're going to be the main therapeutic tool and you're working with a person, then you need to look after yourself as well. And I've found I went into the job, and in the interview talked about the importance of clinical supervision. I haven't had a clinical supervision session yet because I keep on cancelling. I'm a supervisor, and I think that it's enormously important not to let the flow of work hit you, and then you become process-driven. To be person-centred and person-focused, you have to also be reflective and reflexive in what you're doing, and have an element of self-care in there as well.
I think third year is a really difficult time, so I feel for everyone who's a third year just now. I think it's stressful thinking about where you're going to be working, what you're going to be doing, and if it's what you want to do, or if it's the right start, and all that kind of stuff. I suppose I would say, again, having gone straight into the community, I think that's really great if you want to do it, and I think it's just really important to just keep asking questions, because it is a really strange shift between one minute you're a student, the next minute you're a nurse, and actually you're responsible and you make some of the decisions. So I think so long as you have a team around you, just keep asking, just being curious, and yeah, I think that's what I would say. I suppose nobody in any given team is going to be the expert on everything, because everybody can still learn more. So I think it's just about creating discussions and not being afraid to ask.
Just to say that as the person who uses the services, we don't distinguish between whether you're a third year, a first year student, or long in the tooth like nobody here.
Yeah, I just want to respond because I've been qualified for 6 weeks. So I actually went straight into the inpatient environment in a male PQ in a large city. It's been a very overwhelming experience so far, and some of the shifts are just you leave work not wanting to go back, and it already assaults you on that level like that quickly. But trying to break down the reasons why that's the case is the responsibility of being nurse in charge is really is huge. Like, you really feel it when you're there. But what I haven't realised, what I didn't predict, was my response to that anxiety actually to micromanage more than I would have thought I would do as a nurse in charge. And so I give myself a to-do list that's like a third or 50% bigger than the already qualified nurses who I'm working with, who are in charge of medication, because I can't give medication yet. And I would just be wary of that impulse. So if you've got healthcare assistants or social therapists, or whatever the terminology is where you're working, who can do the general observations and do the intermittents, you don't need to check up on them all the time. Check that they're done, but like little things like that, just give yourself time to prioritize what you need to do, and try and not let that anxiety push you to try and cover all aspects, because you won't leave on time, and you'll already start to feel so tired really quickly. So I've had a few days off, so I'm feeling better now, and I'm going to try and work on that. But I've noticed just personally that's something that I've done that I didn't expect myself to do.
I never used this expression at dinner last night when you told me that story, but it struck me as consuming our own when you told me that story.
Education and NHS Lothian, all newly qualified to come to NHS Lothian will be on a 1-year newly qualified practitioners programme, so don't worry when you qualify, because you will have 8 days of protected time to come to education programmes that are set down by chief nurses. You will get Flying Start guidance and time to do your Flying Start programme. You'll get reflective practitioners small groups in the afternoon, and you also do a small project of change to help you making a difference in practice. So there is a whole year that you will get support when you're working in the program.
Jim?
First of all, it's always great to attend these conferences, see so many student nurses attending them, as well as educators and trained nursing colleagues. Obviously, my grey hair proves that I've been a mental health nurse for quite a few years. It's an excellent profession, I have to tell you. Speaking to the students here that are going through their training and are about to qualify, I've never looked back. I've not always been a nurse. I worked in industry for many years, retrained, and it's been fantastic. It's a learning experience that will go on throughout your career. You just don't learn at university level. You will learn as you go through your career. Who are the people I remember and continue to remember throughout my career is the excellent clinicians that I've worked alongside. My advice would be listen to them, work with them. Your expectations, don't put too much in yourself. You are not an expert. You have a set of skills leaving university that you will have. Your learning will really start in earnest when you work alongside patients. My mantra is patients are the real experts because they're the individuals who actually live with mental illness. The other thing is, in terms of the education you get, and up in we call out for my university, University of West of Scotland, which is fantastic, as well as undoubtedly Napier and Dundee and all the other universities that I've worked with. That was a politician in me. But certainly looking forward, one of the things that you can do, and the most important essence of being a mental health nurse to me, is you hear this word and this phrase, therapeutic agent. Engaging with people is so important to the success, whatever that may be, in terms of the role that you're performing. And mental health nursing, as we're aware, is very, very diverse. I've been really fortunate to work in NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde and NHS Ayrshire and Arran, predominantly as an acute nurse, both in adult and elderly psychiatry. Multiple challenges in that, great learning curve working in these type of wards, but be yourself. You're not a therapeutic agent, you're you. Use the skills that you have and the attributes you have in terms of you as a person. Don't lose sight of who you are. One of the things I'll always remember coming into nursing was, I lost my identity. I was Jim McGinn, but then I was Jim McGinn the nurse. I'm still Jim McGinn after all these years. So don't let that, get on top of you. The other thing I remember finally, because I can talk like legs off a donkey, is I always remember one of my first experiences, and one of the panel members mentioned it there. I was working in a very, very busy ward and someone shouted, "Nurse." I looked over my shoulder, but that nurse was me. Don't be afraid, folks.
Okay. Right, I think we've just about come to end, unless there's got any final burning point. One final point then.
John Sawkins, like Dianna, I'm involved in as a co-trainer on the psychosis project. One thing that interested me from what people were saying was the whole issue of diagnostic overshadowing, which is basically that you read the notes, the patient's mentally ill, they haven't got a physical problem. Getting over that point that they do have physical problems. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'd like to thank you all for your participation. I'd particularly like to thank the four panel members for putting themselves up here front and centre. Thanks very much.